Why printing money never solves the problem. At first glance, printing money seems like the simplest fix imaginable. People see prices rising faster than wages, economies slowing, and hardships mounting. And the solution appears obvious. Inject more currency into the system and everyone will feel better. It feels immediate, generous, and almost magical in its simplicity. Yet, this easy solution ignores a fundamental truth about money. It is a measure of value, not just a medium of exchange. Simply increasing the amount of money circulating does not create new wealth or increase production. It only changes the dynamics of how value is distributed and how prices adjust, often in ways that hurt the most vulnerable first. History is littered with examples, from the Weimar Republic to Zimbabwe, where printing money without addressing underlying economic productivity led to chaos rather than relief. Another challenge is psychological. When people see governments or institutions using money creation as a fix, it reinforces short-term thinking. Individuals, businesses, and policymakers begin to treat money itself as infinitely flexible, rather than a representation of real value, encouraging riskier behavior, over-leverage, and unsustainable expectations. The illusion of abundance makes it harder to prioritize real growth, investment, and efficiency. Ultimately, printing money creates a mirror effect. It reflects the problem rather than resolving it. Those who understand it can anticipate distortions, protect their assets, and make strategic decisions, while those who rely on temporary abundance are often the last to feel the warning signs. Money creation is seductive because it feels immediate and tangible, but its consequences are delayed, uneven, and often unfairly distributed. Understanding why it never truly solves the problem is essential for anyone navigating personal finance or observing macroeconomic trends. More money does not mean more value. One of the most common misconceptions about money is that more of it automatically increases wealth. At a surface level, it seems intuitive. If there is more money circulating, everyone should be able to spend more, right? But money is a measure, not the underlying substance of value. Wealth comes from production, services, goods, and the real work that creates tangible outcomes. Increasing the quantity of money does not increase these underlying assets. Instead, it dilutes the relative value of each unit of currency, often quietly at first, until the erosion becomes obvious in prices, savings, and contracts. This principle explains why people often feel poorer even when more money is introduced into the system. Prices adjust to reflect the expanded money supply, meaning the same basket of goods costs more than before. Wages, salaries, and fixed incomes rarely increase at the same pace, leaving individuals to navigate the gap between nominal abundance and real scarcity. The problem is particularly acute for the middle class and lower income groups, whose purchasing power is more immediately constrained. The disconnect between money quantity and real value also affects decision-making. People assume that having access to more currency allows for more opportunity, but the reality is that opportunity is tied to production and resources, not paper or digits. Finally, this insight reframes how financial decisions are made. Saving, investing, and managing resources become strategies to preserve real value rather than chase nominal abundance. Recognizing the distinction between more money and more value empowers individuals to act strategically, ensuring that personal and systemic resilience is prioritized over the illusion of immediate abundance. Inflation as a hidden tax. Printing money inevitably triggers inflation, a rise in prices that quietly erodes purchasing power. Inflation acts like a hidden tax because it diminishes the real value of earnings, savings, and fixed assets, often without explicit acknowledgement. People may feel that their income remains stable in nominal terms, but the real cost of living increases steadily, reducing discretionary spending, forcing budgetary compromises, and creating an invisible drag on wealth accumulation. Those with limited access to assets or hedging tools experience the most acute effects, making inflation a regressive and subtle form of redistribution. This hidden tax is insidious because it is gradual. Small increases in the price of food, fuel, housing, and services accumulate over time, requiring constant adjustment and forcing individuals to make trade-offs they might not have anticipated. People often notice inflation only after its cumulative effects become impossible to ignore. By then, strategic decisions, savings, and investments may have already been distorted. Understanding inflation as a silent, invisible tax allows for proactive strategies, hedging, investing, and adjusting spending, to protect real purchasing power rather than reacting passively to its effects. Inflation also changes behavior in predictable ways. It demonstrates why monetary solutions cannot replace structural fixes, and why patience, foresight, and deliberate strategy are essential for maintaining financial stability in any economy. Individuals who grasp this principle can navigate both personal finances and broader economic conditions with a clarity that prevents reactive, fear-driven decisions. Short-term relief that creates long-term pain. Printing money often feels like relief because its effects are immediate and visible in the short term. People can pay bills, governments can stimulate spending, and markets often rally on the initial influx of liquidity. Yet this relief is deceptive. The longer-term consequences are almost always more damaging than the initial problem. By focusing on nominal gains rather than underlying economic fundamentals, monetary expansion introduces distortions, asset bubbles, and imbalances that surface months or years later, often when the original relief is no longer remembered. Short-term relief also encourages dependency and complacency. Businesses, governments, and individuals may defer structural reform or efficiency improvements because money appears to solve problems quickly. This postponement compounds systemic risk, ensuring that when the effects of inflation, asset volatility, and eroded purchasing power arrive, the pain is amplified. Individuals who rely on temporary relief without strategic foresight often face harder adjustments, reduced options, and diminished long-term security. Furthermore, short-term relief reshapes incentives. People and institutions begin to expect quick fixes rather than sustainable solutions, reinforcing cycles of temporary relief followed by systemic disruption. It shifts focus from reactive reliance to proactive strategy, ensuring that short-term gains do not become long-term setbacks. By internalizing these lessons, people can navigate monetary policy, inflation, and systemic change with foresight and agency rather than being swept along by transient illusions. Asset inflation that leaves most people behind. When governments or central banks inject liquidity into the system, one of the first effects is a surge in asset prices. Stocks, real estate, and commodities often rise rapidly, creating a perception of wealth that is, in reality, unevenly distributed. Those who already own assets benefit immediately, while the majority of people, especially those who rely solely on wages, see little advantage. This creates a widening gap between asset owners and non-owners, magnifying inequality even as the headline economy may appear to grow. Asset inflation becomes a mechanism that concentrates wealth, often disguised as market prosperity. For many, the effects are indirect but powerful. Housing prices soar beyond affordability. Stock market gains remain inaccessible for those without capital, and commodities like metals, energy, or agricultural products spike in cost. Meanwhile, wages remain stagnant or grow slowly relative to these asset-driven increases, meaning everyday life becomes more expensive while perceived prosperity happens elsewhere. People may feel trapped. The economy seems to work for some but not for the majority, and the structural gaps widen quietly over time. The psychological effect is subtle but insidious. It makes markets look robust while masking the reality that real wealth, purchasing power, productive capacity, and accessible opportunities may be eroding for the majority. Understanding this dynamic shifts focus from following asset price trends blindly to evaluating true value, resilience, and long-term sustainability in personal finance. Currency trust begins to erode. Trust is the foundation of any currency. People accept money because they believe others will accept it, that it retains value, and that it is backed by stable institutions. Printing money erodes this trust subtly and over time. As currency supply increases without corresponding growth in goods or services, people begin to perceive that the value of money is not guaranteed. This perception may initially appear abstract, but it manifests in behavior. Individuals start to spend more quickly, hedge with tangible assets, or demand higher wages, anticipating that the purchasing power of money will decline. Currency trust erosion is rarely sudden. People don't immediately panic when money is printed. Rather, confidence diminishes gradually, often in ways that policymakers and institutions underestimate. Everyday decisions, savings, investment, debt management, are influenced by perceived reliability. When trust begins to falter, financial systems that rely on steady confidence, like lending, mortgages, and long-term contracts, become riskier and more volatile. This is why the long-term consequences of money printing are often felt in areas that seemed unrelated initially. Credit availability tightens, insurance markets fluctuate, and inflation expectations begin to shape behavior long before the economy itself catches up. The psychological impact is powerful. People naturally resist holding assets that they believe are losing value. In essence, printing money without structural solutions is a slow undermining of trust. The longer-term effects are not just economic. They are psychological, shaping expectations, behavior, and strategic decisions for every participant in the financial system. Recognizing this process allows for informed action rather than passive exposure to risk. Wages lag behind price reality. One of the most frustrating consequences of monetary expansion is that wages rarely keep pace with rising prices. As money floods the system, goods, services, and housing costs increase faster than salaries, creating a widening gap between effort and reward. While the nominal numbers on paychecks may rise slightly, real purchasing power often declines. People feel the pinch in everyday life. Groceries cost more, bills add up faster, and discretionary spending shrinks, even if pay increases appear normal on paper. This lag is structural. Employers cannot immediately adjust compensation for macroeconomic shifts, and labor markets often respond more slowly than asset markets. Inflationary pressures act unevenly across industries and regions, meaning some workers experience higher cost of living increases than others. The mismatch between wages and prices is especially damaging to households dependent on steady income, creating a sense of instability even when employment is secure. The disconnect between income and costs changes behavior profoundly. People delay purchases, seek multiple income streams, or take on debt to bridge the gap. Over time, this lag reinforces inequality and compresses middle-class resilience. Those with capital, assets, or inflation-protected income sources gain relative advantage, while those reliant on wages bear the brunt. Recognizing this allows individuals to anticipate challenges and make strategic decisions that protect lifestyle, security, and long-term financial stability. Encouraging dependence instead of resilience. Repeated monetary interventions often foster dependence rather than resilience. When individuals, businesses, or governments rely on liquidity injections to solve immediate challenges, they may delay adapting, innovating, or building robust systems. This dependence is subtle but pervasive. People adjust habits based on the expectation that money or credit will always be available to cover gaps, creating a structural reliance on temporary fixes. Dependence discourages long-term thinking. When relief is expected, proactive planning diminishes, risk tolerance is misaligned, and strategies for self-sufficiency are deferred. For households, this may appear as living paycheck to paycheck with debt cushions or relying on external assistance. For businesses and institutions, it manifests as short-term operational focus, underinvestment in efficiency, or over-leverage, expecting liquidity or monetary intervention to correct problems. The psychological effect is also critical. People internalize the expectation that solutions will be provided externally, reducing initiative and agency. Over time, resilience, the ability to weather shocks, plan strategically, and maintain stability, erodes. Dependence encourages systemic fragility. When monetary support is reduced or delayed, households, businesses, and institutions face immediate pressure, magnifying the negative consequences of prior interventions. Recognizing the distinction between temporary relief and sustainable security transforms financial behavior, promoting autonomy, foresight, and resilience over short-term comfort or reactive reliance. Debt expansion without real growth. Printing money often leads to increased borrowing, both at the household and institutional level. Debt becomes more accessible, interest rates may remain low, and credit expansion is encouraged to stimulate spending. Yet this growth is often nominal rather than real. The economy may show higher activity, but productive output, innovation, and efficiency do not increase proportionally. Essentially, money is moving faster, but underlying value is not growing, creating fragility and future obligations that outpace capacity. Debt expansion has immediate appeal. People can buy now, governments can spend now, and markets can respond positively. But over time, the accumulation of debt creates pressure. Servicing obligations diverts resources from investment, consumption, and long-term wealth building. Households may experience strain when income cannot keep up, while institutions face rising risk when borrowed capital is dependent on artificially maintained conditions. Understanding debt expansion in this context shifts behavior from reactive borrowing to strategic planning. Awareness of the limitations of money-created credit helps individuals prioritize debt that is productive, manage leverage carefully, and focus on opportunities that generate real value rather than nominal illusions. Knowledge becomes the tool that separates temporary comfort from sustainable security, ensuring that debt serves as a lever rather than a trap. The illusion of control. Many people believe that having money, or even managing it diligently, gives them complete control over their financial destiny. Budgets, investments, savings, and planning are all ways we try to assert mastery over our lives. Yet, the reality is far more complex. Control in financial systems is often an illusion because external forces, monetary policy, inflation, market shifts, technological disruption, and global economic changes, play a massive role in shaping outcomes. No matter how carefully one plans, these forces can override individual effort, making control more perception than reality. This illusion is dangerous because it encourages overconfidence. People assume that if they follow certain rules, save 20%, invest in safe assets, or time the market, they are immune to systemic shifts. In reality, these measures provide stability only within a moving environment, and when the system changes, even the most disciplined strategies can falter. The sense of control can lead to complacency, preventing individuals from adapting to broader trends, diversifying strategies, or preparing for scenarios outside their personal experience. Psychologically, this illusion feeds both hope and stress. Ultimately, recognizing the illusion of control reframes financial strategy. It emphasizes influence over direct command, preparation over prediction, and resilience over rigid expectation. Accepting that not everything can be controlled is not defeatist. It is empowering, allowing individuals to allocate effort where it truly matters rather than chasing a mirage of mastery. Why the problem always comes back. Economic problems, whether inflation, debt crises, or financial instability, rarely vanish permanently. History shows a repeating pattern. Temporary solutions, such as printing money, lowering interest rates, or injecting liquidity, provide relief, but the underlying structural issues remain. Productivity gaps, inequality, asset inflation, and behavioral patterns continue to operate, ensuring that without systemic reform, problems resurface in cycles. The recurrence is not coincidence. It is a consequence of addressing symptoms instead of root causes. This recurrence also has a psychological dimension. Individuals and institutions often misinterpret temporary relief as resolution, adjusting behavior based on a distorted sense of security. People spend, borrow, or invest with optimism that conditions will persist, only to face inevitable corrections when the structural imbalance reasserts itself. The problem's return highlights the importance of understanding the difference between short-term fixes and long-term solutions. Ultimately, the recurring nature of financial problems underscores the necessity of systemic thinking. By examining root causes rather than symptoms, by preparing for volatility instead of assuming stability, and by cultivating knowledge instead of hope alone, individuals and societies can mitigate the damage caused by these recurring patterns and maintain strategic advantage even when problems inevitably resurface. What actually creates sustainable stability? Sustainable stability is not created through temporary relief, luck, or reactionary measures. It emerges from structures that generate real value, adaptability, and resilience. At an individual level, this means creating diversified income streams, investing in assets that appreciate relative to real value, maintaining liquidity for unexpected shocks, and continuously upgrading skills and knowledge. At a societal level, sustainable stability requires balanced monetary policy, productive investment, and institutions that maintain trust, fairness, and accountability. Stability is proactive, not reactive. Key to creating lasting stability is aligning resources with real production. Money alone cannot create stability. It is the output of goods, services, innovation, and human capital that underpins economic security. Systems that focus on short-term measures, liquidity injections, or speculative gains fail to deliver sustainable stability because they do not address the processes that generate tangible value. Sustainable stability also requires behavioral adaptation. Those who understand that security comes from real value, preparation, and adaptability are less likely to be swayed by temporary gains or short-term relief. The combination of systemic insight, practical strategies, and behavioral discipline produces stability that lasts across economic cycles. Printing money rewards speed over patience. One of the hidden consequences of printing money is that it disproportionately benefits speed over patience. Those able to access liquidity early, speculate on asset inflation, or leverage short-term gains often see immediate advantages, while long-term planners and patient investors may be left behind. This dynamic creates a distorted incentive structure where immediate action is rewarded over thoughtful, measured strategy. Individuals who rely on conventional patient approaches, slow savings, prudent investment, deferred gratification, can find their real value eroded as those responding to liquidity first capture most of the gains. This effect extends beyond individuals to markets and institutions. Businesses that react quickly to increase liquidity, adjust pricing, or acquire assets early often outperform more stable competitors. Governments and financial institutions can also appear effective in the short term, generating apparent growth that masks long-term fragility. The reward of speed over patience also shapes psychological behavior. Ultimately, the bias toward rewarding speed highlights the misalignment created by monetary interventions. It underscores why systemic reliance on temporary liquidity is problematic, why patience can feel unrewarded in the short term, and why sustainable financial strategy must consider both immediate opportunities and long-term stability. Why understanding this matters? Understanding the consequences of monetary expansion, printing money, and systemic financial behavior matters because it separates illusion from reality. People navigate personal finances, investments, and planning every day, often assuming stability or progress is natural when in fact it is heavily influenced by unseen systemic forces. Awareness transforms how decisions are made, allowing individuals to anticipate changes, protect value, and structure strategies to weather uncertainty. Without understanding, decisions are reactive, guided by hope or perception rather than insight. This understanding is practical. It informs how people save, invest, borrow, and allocate resources. It allows households to preserve purchasing power, identify opportunities to grow real wealth, and avoid traps created by temporary interventions. It shapes career and business decisions, highlighting the importance of adaptability, skill development, and diversification. Psychologically, understanding these dynamics reduces stress and prevents misattribution of failure. People no longer blame themselves for circumstances largely influenced by systemic forces. They can differentiate between what is controllable and what is not, focusing energy on decisions that truly impact long-term outcomes. Insight fosters agency, turning awareness into actionable strategy rather than confusion or despair. Ultimately, understanding this matters because it creates clarity in a world of complexity. It empowers individuals to navigate financial systems intelligently, anticipate challenges before they arrive, and make decisions grounded in reality rather than illusion. Awareness is the first step toward resilience, stability, and true financial autonomy, ensuring that short-term disruptions do not dictate long-term outcomes. Printing money feels like a solution because it delays pain. But delayed pain does not disappear. It compounds. If this video helped you see why easy fixes often fail, hit like so others can find it. Subscribe if you want clear conversations about economics, money, and reality without noise. Share this with someone who wonders why things feel more expensive every year. And leave a comment with your thoughts, because understanding money is the first step toward protecting yourself from its illusions.